The Volvo XC40 has thus far been our pick of this range of compact luxury SUVs, and for very good reason. It seems to do just about everything right. It's got space, practicality, versatility, luxury, comfort, performance, and it looks rather good too. And sure, it might not be the most affordable car in its class, but it packed in equipment that belongs 2 segments above. The only thing missing from its impressive repertoire, frankly, has been a petrol engine. And that has just changed, because this is that Volvo XC40 petrol which I'm driving for you today. R design is the name of the trim level, and yes, it's the same one that the diesel car was originally launched with back in 2018. What it gets you is a black roof and black accents such as the grille and the wing mirrors, as well as a sporty set of 18-inch alloy wheels. On the inside, it's exactly the same as before, with the same minimalist interiors in all black. The option of orange fabric accents seems to have been removed this time, however, which makes it look a little dour. This is particularly true in the back seat, which, though spacious enough, is set low with a backrest that's rather upright. The boot, however, is still large enough and has that clever flexible folding floor arrangement. The R design is a fully loaded trim, and as mentioned before, that means equipment that belongs 2 classes above. There is the usual stuff like dual zone climate control, powered front seats with driver side memory, auto headlamps and wipers, tire pressure monitoring, the 9-inch touchscreen with CarPlay and Android Auto, and more. But the standout features include a digital instrument cluster, a huge panoramic sunroof, a powered tailgate, and a full suite of radar-based safety tech, including adaptive cruise control and autonomous driving. In fact, only 2 features seem to have been removed from the diesel version. The first is heated seats at the front and the rear, which most people won't miss too much. And the second is something they really should not miss too much. Where the diesel XC40 was all-wheel drive, this one is front-wheel drive only, and as you can see, even if you're silly enough to drive it into a soft sand beach, as long as you're careful, you'll still make it out just fine. Where it belongs though is out on the road, and that's where you can really get to know this new engine. So the engine under the hood here is Volvo's 2-litre turbocharged petrol engine, which makes 190 horsepower and 300 Newton meters of torque. It is, like the diesel, mated to an 8-speed automatic gearbox. The first thing you start to notice is that refinement is not excellent. Sure, it is quiet enough at lower revs, but the moment you get to about 2000, you can start hearing the engine. By the time you get to about 3,500, it gets quite noisy, and it's not a nice noise. It certainly got a good amount of performance. That 300 Newton meters is a good solid reserve of torque, and when you want to get moving, it all comes through really nice and strong. The only thing is that it's not the most exciting engine out there. It's not particularly rev happy, nor does it suddenly give you a nice strong hit of torque, but instead it's very linear, very smooth, and it makes its power in a gentle surge. And I suppose that's just as well, because the Volvo XC40 isn't the sportiest compact luxury SUV around. Like the diesel, it's better to drive it at a more relaxed pace to get the most out of it. Now, as before, on the handling front, it's not the sharpest tool in the shed. It's got a lot of body roll, the steering is nice and slow, but there is a certain satisfaction to be had from steering this car, and that has a lot to do with the steering itself. Sure, it's not the quickest or the sharpest, but it's just so nicely weighted and really fluid. It feels great. Now, ride comfort again remains the same as before. The car's riding on 18-inch wheels and it has a slightly firmer setup, but that means great stability out on the highway, and ride comfort is actually not too bad even at low speeds. The suspension does a good enough job of absorbing the bumps. Priced at 39.9 lakh rupees ex-showroom, the XC40 T4 is not the cheapest in its segment. However, since it's available only in this fully loaded R design guise, you do get a lot of car for the money. The design turns heads, the cabin is practical, and it's got by far the lengthiest features list. Then there's the petrol engine, which despite not being the best in terms of refinement, has enough grunt to get you around. The service network isn't as widespread as its German rivals, but it's expanding rapidly, and we feel that's a small price to pay for a well-sorted SUV that gives you almost everything you'd want. So, if you're in the market for a compact luxury SUV with a petrol engine and driving thrills are not high on your priority list, the XC40 T4R design is an option worth serious consideration.
Mercedes has finally given the GLC some much needed TLC, as the old car was getting just a bit too dated to go against its new and updated rivals. Now the changes might seem incremental on the outside, but there's a lot more that's happened under the skin.
At first glance, it is hard to tell the updated GLC from the previous one, and you need to look closer to spot the changes. At the front, the headlights get a new design pattern, and you also have a new design for the twin slat grille along with revised bumpers. View it from the side and you notice the bigger 19-inch wheels that look premium and give it a more proportionate stance. Carried over is the silver finished running board with the subtle black plastic cladding that gives it that SUV cred. Over to the rear, the taillights now feature LEDs and get a revamped design for the cluster that is more in line with the new GLE and GLS.
The other big change on this GLC is the engine. You now get a more powerful 194 horsepower diesel engine that you also see on the C-Class and the E-Class. This engine is also BS6 compliant, which means refinement levels are good, but the performance is not as sprightly, and you do miss that low-end grunt that was there on the older car.
You do get drive modes to choose between Eco, Comfort, Sport and Individual, but even in the most responsive sport setting, the engine fails to excite. Then there is the 9-speed automatic gearbox, which is smooth to shift but isn't as fast as the DSG on the Audi Q5 or even the 8-speed automatic on the BMW X3. The GLC then is not a car that you would enjoy driving fast. However, thanks to the big jump in refinement, it is a much more relaxed and comfortable drive than before. Step inside and it is a familiar sight, as there are minor revisions to the interior. While the dashboard design is similar, the refreshed center console now features a nice blend of open-pore wood and brushed aluminum that feels plush. Then there is the new steering, which gets the feather touch controls like all modern Mercs, but what's a bit of a downer is the instrument cluster that is still analog, despite the international version getting a full digital unit. You also have a bigger touchscreen, wireless charging and Type-C USB ports. Not much has changed at the back apart from the windows that now get sunblinds. But the big draw with this GLC is the new infotainment system called MBUX. Like all modern cars, the GLC too comes with an embedded SIM card for connectivity, and you also get a voice command system. So all you have to do is say "Hello Mercedes" and follow it up with a command, and the car will do it for you. It has no problems with the accent and is one of the most responsive systems around. Also, in this day and age, what's a car without a dedicated app? The Mercedes Me app is part of the MBUX system, and through it you can lock or unlock the car, check the vehicle status like the condition of the battery, fuel level, condition of your brakes, and even make SOS calls for assistance.
Now in terms of ride comfort, this GLC is not too different than the old car. Yes, the bigger wheels do mean there is a hint of firmness over broken roads, but overall the soft suspension gobbles up potholes with ease.
In terms of handling, there is little that has changed. The steering is just as fluid as before and weighs up with a gain in speed. Body control is decent too, despite a soft suspension setup, and what's also impressive is the high-speed stability. So while retaining its aggressive price point, the changes to the GLC have done well to bring it back to the front lines alongside the likes of the X3, Q5 and XC60. It's still not the most exciting to drive, but it rides significantly better, and the new diesel engine apart from being BS6 compliant, is smoother too. The biggest change though is the MBUX infotainment system, which is really among the best in the industry now. Yes, perhaps a few more features could have been added to the equipment list, but that aside, the GLC has done well to catch up to its newer rivals.
You might have seen our review of the Jaguar XC facelift recently, and now it's here with us in flesh in India. It's the recently launched 2019 update, and in this stunning red paint shade, it's an absolute head turner. What else is new in the car? How does it drive? In this video, we'll answer just that. Changes to the exteriors are subtle. The LED headlamps are now sleeker and the DRLs double up as dynamic turn indicators. Its grille is now larger and bolder. This top-spec SE variant gets the black pack as standard, which includes black and chrome bits on the front grille, fender embellishments and window surrounds. The LED tail lamps have been revised too, and its bumpers now get some styling tweaks. Overall, the XE looks rather attractive, especially in this Caldera red paint shade paired with the satin grey wheels. Just like the exteriors, the interiors get subtle changes, and these subtle changes make all the difference. The climate control area is now touch operable with backlit keys. Then, the round gear selector knob has made way for a more conventional unit, and the area around it gets lacquered wood trim. Its touchscreen is a larger, slicker unit with Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. Wireless charging too is part of the package. A big addition is the all-digital instrument cluster that's crisp, intuitive and offers multiple screen options. Even the steering is new, and all the controls on it are touch operable with clever backlighting. The layout of the dashboard is largely unchanged, so you still have the Riva loop which runs across the breadth of the dashboard and nicely cocoons the driver into the cabin. The seats are comfy and you sit low in a rather sporty driving position. An interesting feature here is the memory function for the seats, which not only remembers the preset seat and mirror position, it also remembers the aircon temperature, instrument cluster setting as well as the radio station you are listening to. So the front seat and the driving environment is really sporty, but a good percentage of owners will be seated at the back. So let's see how that is. Now, well, the first thing you'd notice is the narrow door opening. The door cavity is quite narrow, so getting in can be a bit of an issue. And what also is an issue is the high floor lip. And once you're in, you'll notice that the space or even the sense of space is not as good as its rivals like 3 Series, C-Class or even the A4. Now the front seat is set to my driving position, and here while seated behind, I have decent enough knee room and headroom too is adequate. Footroom, however, is at a premium. Now the second thing that I don't like about this back seat is that the seat itself, the backrest, is in a concave, in a cup-like shape. So the sides are a bit intrusive. And then there's this large rear aircon vent and floor hump, which makes the middle passenger really uncomfortable. So this seat is best for two. With this facelift, Jaguar has introduced both BS6 compliant engines. So there's a 2-litre diesel and a 2-litre turbo petrol engine, which we are driving here today. The overall character of this engine is very similar to the car it replaces. So there's a bit of a delay before power really kicks in, but when it does, it comes in a nice and punchy manner. And once you're in the zone, this car lunges forward like a scolded cat. This engine nicely revs all the way to almost 6,500 RPM, and even at those revs, it sounds really, really nice. There are multiple driving modes on offer, including a new rain, ice, snow mode, which enables cleaner launches in low traction conditions. The XC uses an 8-speed ZF unit, but it doesn't feel as refined or as nicely tuned as the other ZF unit that does duty in the BMW 330i. So it's a bit jerky and it's not as seamless or intuitive as the BMW 330i. In fact, if there was one fly in the ointment in this fantastic drive experience, it would be the gearbox. To extract the best out of this engine, just push it into sport mode and this gearbox becomes a lot more in tune with this car's lusty performance. In our tests, it managed to sprint to 100 km per hour from a standstill in 8.61 seconds, which is 2.4 seconds slower than the BMW 330i. The way this car handles bad roads is really commendable. It just absorbs all the rough stuff with absolute ease. Show this car a set of corners and it will leave you with a wide grin. This is exactly my type of connected car. And no, I'm not talking about the advanced voice guidance features. I'm talking about the pure driver connect. The steering is so sharp, the chassis is so well balanced, and the engine is nice and punchy. All of these combined make the XC a mighty enjoyable package. And the brakes infuse huge confidence in the driver while driving in an enthusiastic manner. This car has a lane keeping assist feature, and what it does is it gives you warnings and mild vibrations on the steering wheel when it finds that you're veering off your line. Now we found that this feature works erratically on our streets, especially with unmarked or poorly marked road surfaces. The Jaguar XC still offers a thrilling drive experience, and with this refresh, its interiors feel far more premium now. It does have its fair share of flaws, like its gearbox isn't the most seamless and its rear seat experience could have been better. In conclusion, if you want a stunning luxury sedan in your driveway that's great fun to drive, then the XC is for you. But if you want a more rounded package, its German counterparts still do a better job.
Today is a special day. The motorcycle I'm riding is the most exciting one I've ridden at Autocar. And the time I've spent with it has gone by in a blur, quite like the bike itself. This is it, the 790 Duke. Now we've already ridden the 790 on a racetrack, but near perfect conditions reveal little as to what it's like out in the real world. So that's what we're here to find out. Starting things off with the engine. We first experienced it on the track, and now we had the opportunity to put some numbers to the performance on offer. The 790 Duke demolished a 0 to 60 sprint in under 2 seconds, with 100 km per hour coming in just 1.5 seconds later. Given how eager and responsive this engine can be, you'd expect it to be a bit cumbersome to live with on the streets. But boy did the 790 prove us wrong. KTM's new parallel twin is pleasantly smooth, and the dual counterbalancers keep it that way even higher up in the rev range. Of course, it gets pretty hot in absolutely jammed traffic, but it's not unbearable, and with a little conviction, you could live with it on a day-to-day basis. As for the pillion, well, the high-rise exhaust will serve to be a problem, especially if you're not geared up, and then there's the fact that the right side of the grab rail is in line with the exit of the exhaust pipe. Overall, the bike is what you could consider comfortable. You sit upright on a wide seat, and while the suspension is understandably set towards the firmer side, it's not harshly stiff, and you can certainly get by most city roads without constantly questioning your choice of motorcycle. The superb ground clearance also takes away any tension when you meet a badly designed speed breaker. Despite how docile and well-mannered I just made this bike sound, there's no forgetting that this Duke is an all-out performance machine. Now the electronics that this bike offers play a huge role in how easy it is to ride. So let's take a quick look on what it has to offer. The 790 offers 4 riding modes: rain, street, sport and track that alter throttle response and traction control. Rain mode brings a 2% drop in power and very gentle throttle that almost makes the 790 feel like a well-behaved domesticated animal that waits on your command. Street is quite manageable too, but switch to sport and it will pull at the leash in an almost alarming fashion. Track mode turns it into an all-out hellraiser and the engine became far too responsive for my liking out on a public road. The change in character between the modes is really impressive, and something else that I enjoyed just as much was the quick shifter. Upshifts are seamlessly smooth even at 2 or 3000 RPM, and it works just as well with downshifts, which makes using the system at city speeds smooth and enjoyable. Now unfortunately, the 790 hasn't been around long enough for us to tell you what it's like to maintain. But we've been told that a general service will set you back around 8 to 9,000 rupees. That's usually how much these bigger bikes demand. And considering that the recommended service intervals are every 15,000 kilometers, it's a relatively reasonable price to pay. Unfortunately, despite as much as we'd have liked to, we also didn't have the bike long enough to carry out our standard fuel efficiency test. But in the time we did have it, it returned about 17.5 km to the litre. This was a figure that came about after riding the 790 in heavy traffic and over some very spirited riding on every stretch of open road I encountered. That's not a bad figure at all, considering how rapidly this bike can plaster a smile across your face. I've come to realize that the 790 Duke is as sporty as a commuter can get. Now calling it a commuter is a bit of a crime, but this really is a motorcycle that you can live with and commute on a daily basis. The 790 has more performance on offer than you'll ever need on the streets, and it will be more at home on a racetrack. But considering how hard it is to get frequent track time in India, you might as well invest in a motorcycle that's just as good off one. This 790 Duke walks the fine line between the two remarkably well.
And now it's time for tips on sustainability and protecting the environment with Servo Futura G Plus from Indian Oil. Choose a smaller car if you don't need the size and space. Overloading the car with weight makes it work harder.